Welcome to The Explainer. So today, we're going to dive into the really fascinating and kind of complicated world of Buddhist communities. And we're asking a pretty critical question. Where does supportive spiritual group end and unlicensed therapy begin? Let's just jump right in. That promise of healing, it's a huge draw for people, right? But can these communities actually deliver it safely? Because the very same things that offer so much support can also carry some serious risks when the lines start to get blurry. Okay, so first, let's start with the good stuff. What is the healing power of these communities? Why have people been drawn to them for literally centuries? At the absolute heart of Buddhist practice, you've got this concept of the Sangha. Now, this isn't just, a book club or a weekly get-together. It's considered one of the three jewels of Buddhism, a living, breathing support system that's designed to help you grow. And this idea of the community as a mirror, that's just an incredibly powerful metaphor, isn't it? In a healthy Sangha, the group shows you your own habits, your blind spots, things you might not see yourself. It's a dynamic that's actually, believe it or not, very similar to what happens in clinical group therapy. And look, this isn't just some abstract philosophical idea, right? The benefits are real and you can actually measure them. For instance, a study of Italian Nichiren Buddhists found that practitioners developed way better coping skills. They were using more healthy strategies, like reframing things positively, and fewer of the unhealthy ones, like turning to substance use. But, and this is a big but, that supportive environment, it can get really complicated really fast. As helpful as these groups can be, there's a point where that support starts to get risky, and those lines begin to blur. And this is the absolute core of the whole problem. Think about it. A spiritual teacher is there to offer guidance on a path. A clinical therapist is there to provide treatment for mental health conditions. They might seem similar on the surface, but their training, their ethics, their entire reason for being there, it's fundamentally different. All right, let's really break this down. Just look at the starting point, right? You usually go to a therapist when you're in some kind of distress or crisis, but you typically look for a spiritual mentor after you've already got some emotional stability because you're looking for growth. The whole setup, the goals, they're just coming from completely different places. And this is probably the most crucial point of all. A Dharma teacher can be incredibly wise, super compassionate, but that does not make them a therapist. They don't have the training in clinical diagnosis or the really strict ethical codes that govern therapy, things like managing what's called transference, which is super important. Now, when things go wrong in group therapy, researchers have actually pinpointed a very specific type of leader who causes the most harm. They tend to be narcissistic, they lack empathy, they're intrusive, and they can cause real psychological damage. And this is where it gets really frightening. Without the guardrails of, say, professional ethics, licensing boards, and clinical supervision, those exact same destructive personality types can pop up and even thrive in positions of spiritual authority. An unchecked teacher can have enormous influence, and sometimes the consequences are devastating. Look, this isn't just theory. To see how this plays out for real, let's zoom in on a specific practice from a school of Nichiren Buddhism called Risho Kosekai. So this practice is called Hosa. And right off the bat, you can see the issue. The community itself calls it group counseling. They're literally using the language of therapy to describe what they do. The line is already blurred. And if you look at the structure, it's basically a therapy session. A member shares a problem, the group listens, and then they offer advice. But here's the key. That advice isn't based on psychological principles. It's based on applying Buddhist doctrines, like the Four Noble Truths, to that person's problem. And right here, this is the massive, critical gap. The problem isn't what these leaders know. It's what they don't know. Sure, they're experts in Buddhist doctrine, but they have zero required therapeutic training, no clinical supervision. They're basically acting as unlicensed counselors, and that creates a huge potential for harm. Okay, so what do we do about this? How can these communities get all that healing power without the risk? Well, the answer seems to be all about building strong, clear, and really explicit boundaries. Well, for the communities themselves, it really comes down to professionalizing their whole approach. They need actual written policies that draw a hard line between guidance and therapy. They need to train their teachers on ethics and power dynamics. And just as important, they should require teachers to do their own therapy, to see their own blind spots. And crucially, they need independent groups to handle complaints, kind of like a medical board. And what about you? What can you do as a practitioner? Your most powerful tool is just awareness. Understand that your teacher is not your therapist. Keep your critical thinking engaged. If something feels off, trust that feeling. And know that you have the right to question it. And, most importantly, if you're dealing with a real clinical issue, please seek out a qualified mental health professional. So, the goal here isn't to have them overlap and become one thing. It's about complementarity. The best model is where your spiritual practice can make your therapy deeper, and your therapy can clear out the psychological stuff that gets in the way of your spiritual practice. They should work together, each in its own lane, to support your well being. So, that leaves us with this final question to really think about. Is the community you're in a healthy mirror that helps you grow? Or is it a space that's operating without any guardrails? Because making sure our spiritual journey is both supportive and safe, well, that's key.